The detention cell hummed with the low thrum of alien technology, its walls glowing with a faint purple luminescence that made Marcus's Chen's skin look sickly. He sat cross-legged on the smooth floor, his uniform torn and dirty from 3 days of captivity aboard the Kethmoran battlecruiser. The interrogation sessions had been relentless, but Marcus had given them nothing more than his name, rank, and serial number. Commander Zector entered the cell with his usual theatrical flourish. His forearms spread wide in what Marcus had learned was a gesture of dominance among his species. The alien's chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the cell's lighting, and his compound eyes fixed on the human with undisguised contempt. Human Marcus Chen. Today brings a most entertaining development, Zicthar clicked, his translator rendering the alien's speech into slightly stilted English. The High Command has decided your pathetic species deserves a demonstration of our military superiority. Before we proceed with the conquest of your homeworld, Marcus remained silent, his dark eyes studying the alien's posture and the energy weapon holstered at his side. 3 days of observation had taught him much about Kethmoran behavior patterns, their technology, and their overwhelming arrogance. You will participate in a combat demonstration, Zecthar continued, pacing around the cell with predatory grace. Our newest recruits require practical training, and what better target than a primitive human warrior? You will be given basic weapons and face our cadets in the training arena. Your inevitable defeat will serve as both entertainment and education. The alien paused directly in front of Marcus, lowering his head until they were nearly eye to eye. Of course, you could simply surrender now and spare yourself the humiliation. Kneel and acknowledge the supremacy of the Kethmoran Empire, and your death will be quick and painless. Marcus finally spoke, his voice calm and steady. When do we start? Zecthor's mandibles clicked in what Marcus recognized as laughter. Excellent. Your species' stupidity never ceases to amaze me. The demonstration begins in 1 standard hour. You will be escorted to the armory to select your weapons, though I doubt any of our tools are simple enough for human comprehension. As the commander left, Marcus allowed himself a small smile. The Kethmorans had made their first critical error. They were underestimating human adaptability. During his time in the cell, he had been carefully observing everything around him, from the electromagnetic lock mechanism on his door to the composite materials used in the ship's construction. Most importantly, he had noticed something the aliens hadn't. The furniture in their briefing rooms was made from a remarkably flexible yet strong biopolymer. That reminded him of the compound bows he had crafted as a teenager on his grandfather's ranch in Montana. The escort arrived precisely 1 hour later, consisting of 2 junior officers who seemed more interested in their handheld devices than properly securing their prisoner. They led Marcus through corridors lined with viewing ports, showing the vast emptiness of space. Past training facilities where young Kethmoran recruits practiced with energy weapons that could vaporize a human with a single shot. The armory was a vast chamber filled with racks of alien weapons, each more sophisticated and deadly than the last. Plasma rifles, sonic disruptors, molecular disintegrators, and devices whose functions Marcus couldn't even guess at. The armory master, a grizzled veteran with scars across his carapace, gestured dismissively at the collection. Choose your implements of futile resistance, human. Though I warn you, these weapons require intelligence and coordination far beyond your species' capabilities. Perhaps a simple club would be more appropriate. Marcus walked slowly through the armory, his eyes taking in every detail. He picked up several weapons, hefting them, examining their construction, but ultimately setting each one aside. The aliens watched with growing amusement as the human rejected their advanced technology, piece by piece. Having trouble with the complexity, Zicthor had arrived to observe the selection process. Perhaps we should simply arm you with rocks and sticks, as your ancestors once used? Actually, Marcus said quietly, his attention focused on something else entirely. I think I've found exactly what I need. He wasn't looking at the weapons anymore. His gaze was fixed on a desk in the corner of the armory, made from the same biopolymer he had observed throughout the ship. The desk was elegant in its simplicity, designed for a being with 4 arms, but Marcus could see its potential for something entirely different. You wish to hide behind furniture? The armory master's mandibles clicked with laughter. I have heard humans were cowards, but this exceeds even our lowest expectations. Marcus approached the desk, running his hands along its surface, feeling the grain and flexibility of the material. It was perfect. Better than perfect. The biopolymer had a memory structure that would return to its original shape under stress, but it could be bent and shaped with enough force. Combined with the metallic reinforcement strips running along its edges, it had exactly the properties he needed. I'll take this, he announced. Lifting the desk, the alien stared in stunned silence for a moment before breaking into chittering laughter. Even the guards joined in, their weapon discipline slackening as they clutched their sides. A desk. Ziegthor wheezed through his translator. The human chooses furniture as his weapon. This will make the demonstration even more amusing than I had hoped. Our recruits will learn that humans are not merely primitive, they're completely insane. Marcus hefted the desk, testing its weight and balance. It was heavier than he would have preferred, but the distribution was workable. More importantly, he could already see how to modify it, how to reshape it into something the Kethmarans had never seen before and wouldn't understand until it was too late. Are you certain this is your choice? The armory master asked, his laughter subsiding into mere chuckles. We have knives, projectile weapons, even primitive explosive devices. Surely any of these would serve you better than office furniture. Marcus looked up at the assembled aliens, his expression completely serious. I'm certain. This is exactly what I need, as they escorted him from the armory. Marcus could hear their continued laughter echoing through the corridors. They thought they were leading a madman to his execution. They had no idea they were about to witness something that would shake the foundations of their military doctrine and force them to reevaluate everything. They thought they knew about human warfare. The demonstration was about to begin, and Marcus Chen was ready to show the Kethmoran Empire exactly what a human could accomplish with nothing more than determination, ingenuity, and a piece of furniture. The combat arena stretched out before Marcus like a metallic coliseum, its walls rising 50 meters high and lined with observation galleries packed with Kethmoran officers and dignitaries. The floor was covered with a springy material that would absorb impact but provide good traction. And scattered throughout were various obstacles, barriers, and elevated platforms designed to test tactical thinking and combat agility. Marcus stood in the center of the arena, still holding the desk, while hundreds of alien eyes watched him with barely contained amusement. The murmur of conversation in the gallery sounded like a swarm of insects, and he caught fragments of translated commentary about the insane human and his furniture weapon. Hi, Admiral. Vexquin occupied the central viewing platform, his ancient carapace bearing the scars of a dozen campaigns. He had ruled the Kethmoran military for 3 centuries, and his presence at this demonstration spoke to the importance the Empire placed on understanding their newest enemy. Beside him stood the most senior military advisors and xenobiologists, all eager to observe human combat capabilities firsthand, honored observers. Vexquin's voice boomed through the arena's acoustic system. Today we witness the pathetic desperation of a species facing inevitable extinction. This human, captured during the recent skirmish at the Centauri station, will demonstrate why his kind poses no threat to our glorious expansion. Marcus ignored the commentary and began examining the desk more carefully. The biopolymer construction was even better than he had initially assessed. The material had a natural grain that ran along the length of the desktop, and when he applied pressure, it flexed without breaking. The metallic strips weren't just decorative. They provided structural integrity while maintaining flexibility. Most importantly, the joining mechanisms where the legs attached to the surface could be dismantled with enough force. The human will face a squad of our finest military academy graduates, Vexquin continued. These young warriors represent the future of Kethmoran might. Trained in advanced combat techniques and equipped with standard military weaponry, they will demonstrate proper tactics while dispatching this primitive creature. A gate opened on the far side of the arena. 6 young Kethmorans emerged in formation. They moved with the fluid coordination of their species, their forearms allowing for complex weapon handling that would be impossible for a human. Each carried a plasma rifle as their primary weapon, with backup energy pistols and vibroblades. Their armor was lightweight but effective, designed to deflect energy weapons while allowing maximum mobility. Squad leader Kixanth, identified by the silver crest on his helmet, raised his weapon and addressed Marcus across the arena. Human warrior, prepare to face the might of the Kethmoran Empire. Your primitive weapons and crude tactics will serve only to demonstrate our superiority to the observers. Marcus didn't respond. Instead, he gripped one of the desk legs and began applying steady pressure. The biopolymer stretched and flexed, but the connection points were strong. He needed more leverage. Setting the desk on its side, he braced his feet against the desktop and pulled with both hands on a single leg. The joint mechanism, designed for easy assembly and disassembly, finally gave way with a soft pop. The Kethmorans in the galleries chittered with renewed laughter. Even the military graduates in the arena seemed to relax, assuming their opponent was simply dismantling his weapon in preparation for surrender. Marcus continued working, removing all 4 legs from the desktop and setting them aside. The desktop itself was now a flat rectangle of biopolymer, roughly 2 meters long and 1 meter wide. He picked it up and bent it experimentally, feeling how far the material would flex before reaching its breaking point. It was remarkably resilient, wanting to return to its flat shape but accepting considerable deformation. What is the human attempting to accomplish? One of the observers asked loudly enough for the translation system to pick up. Perhaps he is preparing to wave a flag of surrender, another suggested. Provoking more laughter, Marcus began bending the desktop into a curve, working carefully to avoid overstressing the material. The biopolymer responded beautifully, forming a smooth arc when he brought the 2 shorter ends together. He held it in position while examining the desk legs, selecting the 2 that were longest and straightest. The military graduates had begun their advance. Moving in a standard wedge formation with overlapping fields of fire, they approached cautiously despite their obvious advantage, their training overriding any temptation to simply rush forward and end the demonstration quickly. Marcus took one of the desk legs and began working on its connection joint. Using his teeth and fingernails to strip away the soft metal coupling, the biopolymer core was revealed, flexible and strong. He repeated the process with the second leg, creating 2 long, straight rods from the desk's former supports. The exercise begins now, Vexquin announced. Squad, you may engage the human at your discretion. Kixanth raised his plasma rifle and took aim. At this range, perhaps 30 meters, the shot would be impossible to miss. The human was standing motionless, apparently trying to tie the curved desktop to one of the rods with strips of material torn from his uniform. Human, Kixanth called out. You will surrender now or face immediate termination. Marcus looked up from his work, the curved biopolymer desktop now securely fastened to one of the rods at both ends, forming what looked like an elongated arc. He held up the second rod, which he had been carefully sharpening to a point using the abrasive floor material. I need just a few more seconds. Marcus called back, his voice carrying clearly across the arena. Unless you're in a hurry to lose? The insult sent ripples of shock through the observation galleries. No human had ever shown such disrespect to Kethmoran warriors. Even Vexquin leaned forward in his seat, his compound eyes focusing intently on the scene below. Kixanth's mandibles clicked with rage. You dare mock warriors of the Empire? Your arrogance will cost you dearly. He squeezed the firing stud on his plasma rifle. The weapon hummed to life, building charge for a devastating blast that would reduce the human to constituent atoms. Marcus continued working on his improvised construction, seemingly oblivious to the imminent threat. The plasma rifle reached full charge with a hip-hipped whine that echoed through the arena. Kixanth took careful aim at the human's center mass, his training ensuring a clean, instant kill. Around him, his squadmates spread out to provide supporting fire and prevent any miraculous escape. Marcus finished his modifications and stood up, holding what was unmistakably a bow. The curved desktop formed the body of the weapon. Its biopolymer construction providing exactly the right combination of flexibility and strength. The sharpened desk leg served as an arrow, its metal cord tip gleaming under the arena lights. The observation galleries fell silent as the implications sank in. The human hadn't been randomly dismantling furniture. He had been creating a weapon from the raw materials available to him, transforming office equipment into an instrument of war through nothing more than ingenuity and determination. Marcus knocked his improvised arrow and drew the bowstring, which was fashioned from the elastic cords that had once secured the desk's cable management system. The biopolymer bow bent smoothly under the tension, storing potential energy that would soon be released with devastating effect. Kixanth hesitated. His weapon still charged, but his finger frozen on the firing stud. This was unlike anything in their tactical databases. Humans were supposed to be primitive, limited to crude projectile weapons and basic strategy. They weren't supposed to be able to create advanced weaponry from random materials. Fire. Vexquin's voice cracked like a whip through the arena's speakers. All units, fire immediately. But the moment of hesitation had already cost them their advantage. Marcus had completed his draw, the makeshift arrow aimed directly at Kixanth's position. The human stance was perfect, his breathing controlled, his focus absolute. The demonstration was about to take a very different turn than anyone had expected. Marcus released the bowstring with a soft twang that seemed impossibly quiet in the vast arena. The improvised arrow flew true, its metal cord tip cutting through the air with deadly precision. Kixanth, still processing the unexpected development, began to squeeze his plasma rifle's firing stud. Just as the projectile struck him center mass, the arrow punched through his lightweight combat armor with a wet thunk, the sharpened desk leg penetrating deep into his torso. The squad leader stumbled backward, his plasma rifle discharging harmlessly into the arena ceiling as his forearms went limp with shock. He looked down at the improvised arrow protruding from his chest with what could only be described as bewilderment before collapsing to the arena. The silence that followed was deafening. 500 of the Empire's finest military minds sat in stunned quiet, trying to process what they had just witnessed. A human prisoner, armed with nothing but office furniture, had just taken down a fully equipped Kethmoran warrior with a single shot from a weapon he had constructed in minutes. The remaining 5 graduates broke formation, their disciplined advance dissolving into confused retreat as they sought cover behind the arena's obstacles. Their training had prepared them for energy weapon duels, close quarters combat with vibroblades, and tactical maneuvering against known enemy types. Nothing in their education had covered facing an opponent who could transform random objects into lethal weapons. Marcus was already moving, using the momentary confusion to relocate to a better position behind a raised platform. He quickly examined his bow, checking for stress fractures in the biopolymer frame. The weapon had held together perfectly for the first shot, but he needed to be careful not to overstress the material. He had 3 more improvised arrows, crafted from the remaining desk legs during the past few minutes. Impossible, whispered Dr. Yilmoth, the Empire's leading xenobiologist. Human technology is centuries behind ours. Their weapons are crude, their materials primitive. How could he construct something so effective from our own furniture? High Admiral Vexquin's compound eyes were fixed on the human's position, his ancient mind working through the tactical implications. It's not about their technology, he said quietly. It's about their adaptability. We gave him random materials and he saw possibilities we couldn't imagine. In the arena, the graduates were attempting to regroup. Squad Second Techsphere took command, directing his remaining teammates to establish overlapping fields of fire while advancing on the human's position. They moved more carefully now, their plasma rifles charged and ready, no longer underestimating their primitive opponent. Marcus peered around the edge of his cover, gauging distances and angles. The graduates were advancing in a proper tactical formation now, using cover effectively and maintaining communication. They had learned from their leader's mistake, but they were still thinking in terms of conventional warfare. They expected him to either hold his position or retreat, following standard tactical doctrine. Instead, Marcus did something completely unexpected. He sprinted directly toward the nearest graduate, closing the distance before the alien could bring his weapon to bear. The Kethmoran warrior Nixtal managed to get off a single plasma blast that missed Marcus by inches, the superheated gases singing the air where the human had been a split second earlier. Marcus slid beneath. Psst! Nixtal's follow-up shot, his momentum carrying him into close quarters, where the plasma rifle became a liability rather than an asset. The graduate tried to switch to his backup pistol, but Marcus was already inside his reach. Using the biopolymer bow as a staff to strike at the alien's weapon arms, the impact sent the energy pistol spinning away across the arena floor. Nixtal reached for his vibroblade with his remaining free arm, but Marcus drove an elbow into the alien's thorax, targeting the junction between his carapace plates. The graduate doubled over, gasping in pain, and Marcus finished the engagement with a precise strike to the base of his skull, using the reinforced grip of his improvised bow. The galleries erupted in confused chatter as the second graduate fell unconscious. The human had neutralized two opponents using completely different tactics, demonstrating not just adaptability but tactical innovation that surpassed their own doctrine. He's treating each engagement as a unique problem, observed General Kexmyron, the Empire's foremost strategic theorist. He's not following any predetermined combat pattern. He's improvising solutions based on immediate circumstances. The remaining four graduates had finally managed to establish a proper crossfire, positioning themselves so that any approach to their position would expose the human to multiple angles of attack. They held their positions, plasma rifles aimed at the platform where Marcus had taken cover, waiting for him to make his next move. Marcus, however, was no longer behind the platform. While the graduates had been focused on establishing their firing positions, he had used the arena's acoustic properties to mask his movement, crawling through the shadows to reach a position directly above their formation, on an elevated walkway. He drew his second arrow, taking aim at the graduate, who appeared to be coordinating the other's movements. The angle was challenging, requiring him to account for gravity drop over the extended range. But his improvised bow had proven remarkably accurate. The biopolymer construction damped vibration beautifully, and the elastic cord bowstring provided consistent release characteristics. The arrow took Yixanath in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his plasma rifle clattering across the floor. The graduate didn't fall, but his coordinating commands dissolved into pained chittering. As he tried to extract the improvised projectile from his joint assembly, the remaining three graduates immediately swiveled their weapons toward the elevated position. But Marcus was already moving again, vaulting over the walkway railing to land behind their formation. He had committed to close-quarters engagement again. This time he faced three opponents instead of one. The graduates spun to track him. Their plasma rifles were unwieldy at close range. Marcus rolled beneath their firing arcs, coming up between two of the warriors where their crossfire would risk hitting each other. He struck out with his bow, using it as both shield and weapon to deflect a vibroblade thrust, while simultaneously driving his knee into another graduate's midsection. The melee was chaotic but brief. Marcus used the graduates' superior numbers against them, positioning himself so that their attempts to engage him put them at risk from their teammates' weapons. Within 30 seconds, two more opponents were down, leaving only one graduate still standing, Zixonal. The youngest and least experienced of the squad stood alone in the center of the arena, his plasma rifle trained on the human who had systematically dismantled his entire team. His hands shook slightly as he tried to keep his weapon steady, the reality of his situation beginning to sink in. "Surrender," Human Zixonal called out, his voice carrying a tremor that betrayed his fear. "You have fought well, but you cannot defeat the entire Empire. Yield now, and your death will be honorable." Marcus straightened from his combat crouch, still holding his improvised bow with one arrow remaining. He looked around the arena at the 5 graduates he had defeated, then up at the silent observation galleries where the Empire's military leadership watched in stunned fascination, actually, Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly in the suddenly quiet arena. "I'm just getting started." Zixonal's plasma rifle wavered as he processed the human's words. Around the arena, his fallen squadmates groaned and stirred, beginning to regain consciousness. None were seriously injured, but their pride was thoroughly shattered. They had been systematically outfought by a primitive alien using improvised weapons. "Hi, Admiral."
Vexquin
Leaned forward in his observation throne, his ancient compound eyes analyzing every detail of the human stance and equipment. The biopolymer bow showed signs of stress, but remained structurally sound. More importantly, Kethmoran's superiority, Vexquin announced, his voice carrying through the arena's acoustic system. "Instead, we have witnessed something unprecedented. Human, you have earned the right to speak. Explain how your primitive species accomplished this." Marcus lowered his bow slightly, but kept the arrow nocked, his eyes never leaving Zigzonal. "Your people made several assumptions about humans that turned out to be wrong. You assumed we're primitive because our technology is different from yours. You assumed we're inflexible because we don't have 4 arms. And you assumed we're predictable because you've never seen us adapt." He gestured around the arena with his free hand. "Your graduates are excellent warriors. Their training is thorough, their equipment is superior, and their coordination is impressive. But they were taught to fight against known enemy types using established tactics. When faced with something truly unexpected, their training became a limitation rather than an advantage." Dr. Yilmuth activated his external communicator, his translated voice echoing through the chamber. "Elaborate on your species' adaptability. Our research indicates humans are restricted to single-use tools and linear thinking patterns." Marcus couldn't help but smile at that assessment. "Your research is incomplete. Humans are persistence hunters. We evolved to pursue prey over vast distances, using intelligence and adaptability rather than speed or strength. When you gave me access to your armory, I didn't see weapons I couldn't use. I saw raw materials for weapons I could make." He lifted the biopolymer bow, displaying its elegant curve and the careful modifications he had made to its structure. "This desk was designed as furniture, but I saw its potential as a projectile weapon. The same material properties that make it suitable for supporting weight make it ideal for storing and releasing kinetic energy. Your people designed something better than they realized." The observation galleries buzzed with a translated conversation as the implications sank in. The human hadn't just defeated their graduates through luck or desperation. He had analyzed their technology, identified its potential applications, and weaponized it more effectively than its original designers. General Kethmoran stood up in his section of the gallery. "You claim adaptability as a species trait, but we observe only one individual. How do we know you are representative of human capabilities rather than an exceptional specimen?" "Because adaptability isn't about individual genius," Marcus replied. "It's about how we think. Every human child learns to improvise, to make tools from whatever is available, to solve problems using unconventional methods. You call it primitive because it looks simple from the outside. But simplicity in execution doesn't mean simplicity in conception." To demonstrate his point, Marcus began disassembling his bow, working the biopolymer frame back toward its original flat configuration. The material responded to his manipulations, slowly straightening as he released the tension. Within minutes, he had transformed the weapon back into something that resembled a desktop, though now without its supporting legs. "Your turn," he said to Zixanal. "You have a plasma rifle, probably the most advanced individual weapon in your arsenal. But can you turn it into something else? Can you make it into a communication device, or a cutting tool, or a source of emergency power?" The young graduate stared at his weapon with new eyes, trying to imagine how its components might be repurposed. The exercise clearly frustrated him. The plasma rifle was designed for one purpose, optimized for that function, and completely inflexible in its application. The rifle serves its intended function with superior efficiency, Zixonal replied defensively. "Why would we require it to perform other tasks when we have specialized tools for each purpose?" "Because you might not have access to those specialized tools when you need them," Marcus answered. "Because the situation might change faster than you can adapt your equipment. Because the enemy might force you into circumstances your designers never anticipated." High Admiral Vexquin had heard enough. He activated his personal communicator, sending a signal that caused gates to open around the arena's perimeter. Fresh squads of Kethmoran warriors began filing in. their equipment gleaming under the arena lights. An interesting philosophical discussion, Vexquin announced. But insufficient as a demonstration of species-wide capability. Human Marcus Chen, you have defeated one squad of graduates. Now, face 3 squads of active-duty warriors. Fully equipped and forewarned about your capabilities, 18 Kethmoran soldiers formed up in the arena. Their formation tight and professional. These weren't academy students, but experienced combat veterans, their armor bearing the scars of real battles. They carried not just plasma rifles, but a full spectrum of support weapons. Energy cannons, molecular disruptors, and devices Marcus didn't recognize. Marcus looked around the arena, noting the positions of his previous opponents, dropped weapons and equipment. Several plasma rifles lay scattered across the floor, along with energy pistols, vibroblades, and other military hardware. The Kethmorans had just given him access to an entire armory of advanced weapons. Admiral Marcus called up to the observation platform. Before we start this next round, I want to make sure everyone understands what they're about to see. Your warriors are about to demonstrate why giving humans access to advanced technology is a very bad idea. The veterans began their advance, moving in coordinated teams with overlapping fields of fire and mutual support. Their tactics were flawless, their discipline absolute. They had learned from watching the graduates defeat and adapted their approach accordingly. Marcus dropped his improvised bow and sprinted toward the nearest fallen plasma rifle. The weapon was heavier than he expected. Its alien ergonomics designed for four-armed users, but the basic operating principles were intuitive enough. He rolled behind cover just as the first energy blasts began scorching the arena floor where he had been standing. The real demonstration was about to begin. And this time Marcus wouldn't be limited to improvised weapons. He would show the Kethmoran Empire exactly what a human could accomplish when given access to their own superior technology. The veterans closed in on his position with professional precision, but they were about to learn that capturing a human engineer was very different from fighting one who had just been handed the keys to their entire technological arsenal. Marcus smiled grimly as he began modifying the plasma rifle's power coupling, his fingers working with practiced efficiency on alien circuitry that was actually more intuitive than its designers had intended. The Kethmorans were about to discover that human adaptability wasn't just about making weapons from furniture. It was about making their own weapons work better than they ever imagined possible. Marcus's fingers worked rapidly on the plasma rifle's power coupling assembly, his engineering background allowing him to understand the weapon's basic principles despite its alien construction. The power flow regulators were actually simpler than human designs, relying on brute force rather than elegant efficiency. That simplicity made them perfect for modification. The 18 veterans advanced in textbook formation, their coordinated movement speaking to years of combat experience. Squad Alpha took the left flank, Bravo moved up the center, and Charlie swung wide to the right, creating an inescapable kill zone around Marcus's position. Their plasma rifles hummed at full charge, ready to reduce the human to ionized particles. Target acquired, announced squad leader Grixon, his weapon trained on the barrier where Marcus had taken cover. All units prepare for synchronized termination. But when they rounded the obstacle, Marcus was gone. In his place lay a modified plasma rifle, its power coupling rewired and its containment chamber venting excess energy in a high-pitched whine that made the Kethmoran's compound eyes water. Improvised explosive device. Grixon shouted, but it was too late. The overloaded weapon detonated with a brilliant flash that temporarily blinded the advancing squads and sent them scrambling for cover. The explosion wasn't lethal, but it created exactly the distraction Marcus needed. He emerged from his new position behind the arena's central platform, carrying 2 modified energy pistols whose power cells he had linked in series. The weapons now delivered nearly twice their normal output, their barrels glowing with barely contained energy. The modifications should have made them unstable and dangerous to the user. But Marcus had solved that problem by adding heat sinks fashioned from the metallic strips of his dismantled desk. The first shots took down 2 veterans before they could react. The enhanced energy bursts punching through their combat armor like tissue paper. Marcus rolled to new cover as return fire scorched the air around him, the veterans' discipline keeping their formation intact despite the surprise attack. How is this possible? Dr. Yilmoth's voice crackled through the observation gallery's communication system. He's using our own weapons against us, with greater efficiency than our own warriors. High Admiral Vexquin watched the engagement with growing fascination rather than alarm. He's not just using our weapons. He's improving them. Look at the modification patterns. On the arena floor, Hughes had abandoned his enhanced pistols and claimed a molecular disruptor from another fallen graduate. The weapon was designed to dissolve matter at the atomic level, but its power requirements limited it to short bursts with long recharge cycles. Marcus had identified the bottleneck. It's the safety systems that prevented the weapon from overheating, working with practiced efficiency. He began bypassing the thermal limiters while the veterans regrouped for another assault. The modification would make the weapon incredibly dangerous to use, but it would also eliminate the recharge delay for someone willing to accept the risk. It transformed a support weapon into something approaching a portable artillery piece. Squad Bravo attempted a frontal assault while Alpha and Charlie maintained suppressing fire. It was a sound tactical decision that should have overwhelmed even an enhanced enemy position. They hadn't accounted for Marcus's modified disruptor weapon, delivering sustained fire rather than single shots. The continuous molecular beam carved through their formation like a blade, dissolving their cover and forcing them into disarray. 3 more veterans went down, their armor and weapons simply ceasing to exist where the beam touched them. The survivors fell back in shock, their tactical advantage evaporating as their opponent violated every assumption about how their own weapons functioned. Impossible, breathed General Kexmarin. The thermal cascade should have killed him. Those modifications should have caused catastrophic failure. Marcus discarded the Noglowing disruptor weapon before its improvised heatsink could fail and began working on his next modification. He had identified the central weakness in Kethmoran military thinking. Their weapons were designed to be foolproof, which meant they were also modification-proof. They had prioritized safety and standardization over adaptability. Humans, on the other hand, had a long history of making dangerous modifications to equipment when the situation demanded it. Every human engineer learned to balance risk against capability, to push systems beyond their design limits when necessary. The Kethmarans had never developed that willingness to accept calculated risks. Marcus picked up 2 energy cannons dropped by fallen veterans, weapons normally requiring a 4-armed operator to handle effectively. Instead of trying to use them as intended, he began stripping their power cores and focusing crystals. Within minutes, he had cannibalized both weapons to create a single device that bore little resemblance to its original components. The remaining veterans watched in horrified fascination as the human wielded their own technology with an intuition that bordered on supernatural. Squad leader Grixon attempted to rally his surviving warriors, but their confidence was shattered. They were facing an opponent who understood their equipment better than they did. All squads, fall back to perimeter positions, Grixon ordered. Establish defensive formation and await reinforcements. But Marcus wasn't interested in giving them time to regroup. His improvised weapon combined the focusing capability of the energy cannons with the rapid-fire capacity of the plasma rifles, creating something that existed nowhere in the Kethmoran arsenal. The power requirements were enormous, the heat buildup was dangerous, and the structural stress should have caused immediate failure, but didn't. Marcus had learned to read the alien technology like a language, understanding not just what each component did, but why it did it. He could see the elegant engineering principles beneath the crude execution, the potential that the original designers had left unrealized. The modified weapon fired in a continuous stream of coherent energy that swept back across the arena like a searchlight of destruction. The remaining veterans' cover simply evaporated under the sustained assault, their tactical positions becoming death traps as their own fortifications turned to plasma around them. Within 30 seconds, engagement was over. 18 veteran warriors lay unconscious or incapacitated across the arena floor, their advanced equipment either destroyed or scattered. Marcus stood alone in the center of the combat zone, his improvised weapon smoking and sparking from thermal overload before. Finally shutting down completely, the observation galleries fell silent as the implications became clear. A single human prisoner, given access to Kethmoran military equipment, had not only defeated elite warriors, but had done so using their own weapons in ways they had never imagined possible. High Admiral. Vexquin rose slowly from his throne, his ancient compound eyes fixed on the figure below. "Remarkable," he said quietly. "Absolutely remarkable. We have been asking the wrong question entirely." Dr. Yilmuth activated his communicator with trembling appendages. "Admiral, this demonstration has revealed capabilities we never suspected. If one human can accomplish this, what might an entire military force achieve with access to our technology? Or worse," added General Kexmarin, his voice heavy with dread. "What might they achieve with time to develop their own advanced technology? We've been measuring them against our current capabilities, but humans don't think in terms of current limitations. They think in terms of future possibilities." Marcus looked up at the observation galleries, his expression calm despite having just single-handedly defeated 24 of their finest warriors. "Admiral Vexquin," he called out, "I believe we need to talk. Your demonstration has been very educational, but not in the way you expected." The old admiral nodded slowly. "Indeed, human Marcus Chen. It appears we have greatly underestimated your species' potential. Perhaps it is time for a different kind of conversation entirely." As medical teams rushed onto the arena floor to tend to the fallen warriors, the gathered military leadership of the Kethmoran Empire faced an uncomfortable truth. They had not captured a primitive enemy for study. They had given one of humanity's engineers a guided tour of their most advanced military technology, and he had just proven that humans could not only understand that technology but improve upon it in ways that would reshape the entire balance of power between their civilizations. The medical teams worked with quiet efficiency, tending to wounded warriors who stared at Marcus with expressions that mixed fear, respect, and something approaching. None of the injuries were permanent, but the psychological impact was profound. These veterans had built their careers on the superiority of Kethmoran military doctrine, and in 30 minutes, a human prisoner had shattered their fundamental beliefs about warfare. "Hi, Admiral." Vexquin descended from his observation platform, flanked by his senior staff and a squad of elite guards. The ancient warrior moved with deliberate dignity, but Marcus could see the calculations running behind his compound eyes. The demonstration had changed everything, and both sides knew it. "Human Marcus Chen," Vexquin began, his translator rendering his speech with formal precision, "you have accomplished something unprecedented in the 3-century history of our expansion. No enemy has ever turned our own technology against us with such devastating effectiveness." Marcus set down the remains of his improvised weapon and faced the approaching delegation. "With respect, Admiral, that's because you've never encountered an enemy that thinks like humans do. Your expansion has been built on technological superiority. But technology is only as effective as the intelligence that wields it." Dr. Yilmuth activated a recording device, his scientific instincts overriding diplomatic protocol. "Elaborate on this human thinking process." "Our xenobiological studies indicate your species lacks the cognitive flexibility for advanced technological manipulation." "Your studies are based on incomplete data," Marcus replied. "You've observed humans using tools, but you haven't understood why we use them the way we do. Every human is raised to be a generalist, to adapt available resources to solve immediate problems. We don't just use technology. We reshape it to meet our needs." General Kexamiran stepped forward, a scarred carapace bearing witness to decades of conquest. "Your individual capabilities are impressive, but one warrior cannot defeat an empire. Even if your entire species possesses this adaptability, your numbers and technology remain inferior to ours." Marcus smiled at that assessment. "General, you're still thinking in terms of conventional warfare. You're imagining human fleets facing Kethmoran fleets in direct combat. But that's not how humans fight when we're outgunned. We adapt the battlefield to our advantages, rather than meeting the enemy on their terms. To demonstrate his point, Marcus gestured around the arena at the scattered Kethmoran equipment. In 30 minutes. I've learned more about your technology than your intelligence services have learned about hours and months of study. Every weapon, every system, every design principle is now part of my understanding. And unlike your warriors, I won't forget these lessons or dismiss them as impossible. The implications. Human prisoners weren't just sources of intelligence. They were students of Kethmoran technology, learning and adapting with frightening speed. Furthermore, Marcus continued, I'm not unique among humans. Every human engineer, every technician, every soldier has been trained to think this way. Give any of them access to your equipment, and they'll find ways to improve it that your own designers never considered. High Admiral Vexquin, S. Ancient mind processed the strategic ramifications. You suggest that conquest would be counterproductive. That exposure to our technology would strengthen rather than weaken human resistance. I'm suggesting that your entire approach to expansion needs to be reconsidered, Marcus replied. You've succeeded against species that accepted their technological limitations. Humans don't accept limitations. We see them as engineering challenges to be overcome. Commander Zekther, who had been silent during the demonstration, finally spoke up. Even if your claims are accurate, humanity remains a single world with primitive infrastructure. Our industrial capacity dwarfs yours by several orders of magnitude. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. That's true, Commander. For now, but industrial capacity isn't just about current production. It's about the ability to innovate and adapt. Human industry is decentralized, flexible, and designed to respond rapidly to changing requirements. Every human facility is essentially a research and development center. He paused to let that sink in before continuing. More importantly, humans don't just build things. We build systems that build things. We create infrastructure that creates infrastructure. Give us access to even small samples of your technology, and we'll reverse engineer it. Improve it, and mass-produce the improvements within months rather than decades. Dr. Yilmoth's recording device captured every word as the human outlined capabilities that challenged every assumption. In their xenobiological database, impossible. Technological advancement requires specialized knowledge, dedicated facilities, extensive testing protocols. For you, perhaps, Marcus replied. But humans learned long ago that the best innovations come from unexpected sources. Our greatest technological breakthroughs have come from individuals working outside established systems, combining knowledge in ways that specialists never considered. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the battlecruiser's bridge. A junior officer's voice crackled through the arena's speakers. Admiral Vexquin. Priority message from High Command. We're detecting unusual energy signatures from human space. Multiple sources increasing in intensity. Vexquin activated his personal communicator. Clarify the nature of these signatures. Are we observing military mobilization? Negative, sir. The signatures don't match any known weapon systems. They appear to be ... experimental, as if the humans are testing new technologies, simultaneously across multiple worlds. Marcus smiled grimly. Admiral, I should mention that my capture wasn't the disaster for humanity that you believed. Every piece of intelligence you've gathered from me, every technology you've demonstrated during my captivity, has been transmitted back to human space through quantum entanglement beacons hidden in my uniform's fabric. The Kethmoran officers stared at him in shock. Their prisoner hadn't just been learning about their technology. He had been broadcasting that knowledge across the galaxy in real time. Impossible, Zekther protested. We scanned you thoroughly. No communication devices were detected. You scanned for devices you understood, Marcus corrected. Human technology doesn't always look like technology. Sometimes it looks like fabric weaving, or insignificant chemical traces, or quantum fluctuations that register as background noise. We learned long ago that the best way to hide something is to make it invisible to the scanners looking for it. High Admiral Vexquin, felt the foundations of his strategic thinking begin to crumble. The human hadn't just escaped from their detention. He had turned his captivity into an intelligence-gathering operation that potentially compromised centuries of Kethmoran technological advantage. "What do you want?" Vexquin asked quietly, his translator barely capturing the defeated tone in his voice. Marcus's expression grew serious. "I want you to reconsider your expansion plans, Admiral. Not because you can't defeat humanity militarily, but because the cost of that victory would destroy everything you're trying to preserve. War with humans won't be clean or quick. It will be long, brutal, and transformative for both sides." The arena fell silent, as both species contemplated a future neither had expected when the demonstration began. 6 months later, Marcus Chin stood on the observation deck of the UES Horizon, humanity's first interstellar diplomatic vessel. Watching the massive Kethmoran dreadnought approach through the viewport, the ship's design was familiar now. Its biopolymer hull gleaming with improvements that human engineers had suggested. During the lengthy negotiations that followed his arena demonstration, the Kethmoran Empire had not abandoned its expansion entirely, but it had fundamentally altered its approach. Instead of conquest and subjugation, they now offered technological exchange and mutual development agreements. The change hadn't been easy for either species, but both had recognized that their original path led only to mutually assured destruction. Ambassador Sarah Chen, Marcus's sister and one of humanity's most skilled diplomats, joined him at the viewport. "Hard to believe that 6 months ago they wanted to use you for target practice," she observed. Watching the alien vessel's escort fighters perform complex maneuvers around the diplomatic convoy, Marcus smiled. Remembering the chaos of that day in the arena, "They never wanted to destroy me, Sarah. They wanted to prove they were superior. The problem was, they proved the opposite." The demonstration had indeed shattered Kethmoran assumptions about human capabilities. But its effects had rippled far beyond their military doctrine. News of the human prisoner who had defeated elite warriors using de-improvised weapons and modified technology had spread throughout their empire, inspiring questions about their own technological development and strategic thinking. Dr. Yilmoth, now serving as the chief xenobiological advisor to the Joint Research Commission, had spent months studying human cognitive patterns and adaptability. His findings had been disturbing for traditional Kethmoran thinking, but revolutionary for their understanding of intelligence itself. "The humans don't think in categories," he had reported to the High Council. "Where we see discrete technologies serving specific functions, they see interconnected systems capable of infinite modification. Where we see limitations, they see starting points." Their entire species approaches problems with the assumption that any obstacle can be overcome through sufficient creativity and persistence. The research had led to uncomfortable questions about Kethmoran society's emphasis on specialization and rigid hierarchies. If humans could achieve technological breakthroughs through unconventional thinking and cross-disciplinary collaboration, what innovations had the Empire missed by restricting their scientists to narrow fields of expertise? High Admiral Vexquin, now serving as the military liaison to the Joint Commission, had undergone his own transformation. The ancient warrior had spent decades studying human military history, trying to understand how a species with inferior technology had consistently defeated superior forces through tactical innovation and strategic adaptation. "They don't fight to win," he had concluded in his report to the War Council. "They fight to survive. And survival requires constant change, constant learning, constant adaptation to new threats and opportunities. We fight to maintain our superiority. They fight to overcome their limitations. One approach preserves the status quo. The other creates unlimited potential for growth." The philosophical implications had been staggering for a civilization built on the assumption of their own perfection. If humans could improve Kethmoran technology simply by approaching it with different assumptions, what else might be possible through collaboration rather than conquest? Marcus watched the docking procedures begin, automated systems guiding the massive vessels into alignment. The technology was a hybrid now, combining Kethmoran engineering precision with human adaptability concepts. The result was more elegant and efficient than either species had achieved alone. "Status report on the joint colonies?" Sarah asked, reviewing her diplomatic notes. "Better than expected," Marcus replied. "The Kepler Station project is ahead of schedule, and the technological integration is proceeding smoothly. Both species are learning from each other faster than anyone predicted. The joint colonies had been Sarah's idea, a way to demonstrate that cooperation could be more productive than conquest. Human adaptability and innovation, combined with Kethmoran resources and manufacturing capability, had created settlements that surpassed anything either species had built independently. More importantly, the colonies were producing a new generation of individuals who thought in terms of collaboration rather than competition. Human children were learning Kethmoran engineering principles, while alien youth absorbed human problem-solving methodologies. The cultural exchange was creating perspectives that neither parent species had imagined possible. Commander Zekther, now serving as the security chief for the joint operations, had undergone perhaps the most dramatic transformation of any Kethmoran officer. His initial contempt for human capabilities had evolved into genuine respect and eventually friendship with several human colleagues. "The human approach to security is unconventional," he had reported during one of their regular briefings. "Where we focus on preventing specific threats, they focus on creating systems that can respond to unknown threats. Where we build barriers, they build adaptation mechanisms. Their defenses grow stronger when challenged, rather than weaker." The communication alert chimed, indicating an incoming transmission from Earth. Marcus activated the display to see President Martinez addressing the diplomatic convoy from her office in Geneva. "Ambassador Chen. Commander Chen, I wanted to personally thank you both for making this unprecedented collaboration possible. The technological advances we've achieved through partnership with the Kethmoran Empire have accelerated human development by centuries. More importantly, you've shown both species that our differences can be sources of strength rather than conflict." Marcus thought about the journey from that first day in the detention cell to this moment of interstellar cooperation. The Kethmorans had wanted a demonstration of human weakness, but instead had discovered human potential. The Empire had planned to showcase their superiority, but had learned about the power of collaboration. "The really interesting part," he told Sarah as the transmission ended, "is that we're both still learning. Every joint project reveals new possibilities neither species considered. Every collaboration generates innovations that surprise everyone involved." The docking procedures completed with mechanical precision, and Marcus could see Kethmoran and human personnel working together on the umbilical connections. Their movements were coordinated and efficient, a far cry from the suspicious antagonism that had characterized their first counters. Admiral Vexquin's image appeared on the communication screen, his translator rendering his words with the formal courtesy that had replaced military hostility. "Ambassador Chen, Commander Chen, welcome aboard the Convergence. We are prepared to begin the next phase of our joint exploration program." Sarah gathered her diplomatic materials while Marcus checked his engineering reports. They were about to embark on humanity's first joint interstellar expedition, exploring systems beyond both species. Previous reach using technology that combined the best insights from both civilizations as they prepared to transfer to the Kethmoran vessel. Marcus reflected on the lessons learned during that chaotic demonstration in the arena. The Empire had wanted to prove their superiority through combat, but had discovered something far more valuable: the possibility that different approaches to problems could complement rather than compete with each other. The bow he had crafted from a desk had become a symbol of human adaptability, displayed now in the Joint Commission's headquarters as a reminder that solutions could be found in the most unexpected places. But the real lesson hadn't been about human ingenuity or Kethmoran technology. It had been about the power of thinking differently, of approaching challenges with fresh perspectives, and of recognizing that the greatest achievements came not from defeating others but from learning from them. The galaxy was vast, full of unknown civilizations and undiscovered possibilities. And for the first time in either species' history, they were exploring it together, each making the other stronger than they could ever be alone. The demonstration had ended, but the real experiment had just begun.